Welcome to another edition of Down the Road. My guest coming up in just a second is maybe going to shock you a little bit if you're a frequent viewer of this show. I think it's great that we're going to have a conversation. But first, I want to let you know that Jim Shaw is going to be joining us in a little bit. And so my suggestion to you is to find Jim's work. Get on your search engine, or as I call it, go do the Google, and find his latest article, which you see published all over the place, and primarily through Forum Communications. And what you're going to see is an interesting take on where we're going on what was leaked out of the Supreme Court. So take a look at that before Jim comes on, and maybe you'll find it interesting, maybe not, but certainly we're going to talk about it. But my first guest is a man that I've spoke to on this show. I shouldn't say to, about. And so it's only right that he gets a chance, and we worked out schedules to speak to me. And that's Trent Loos with Trent on the Loose that you hear right here on the Beck Network, News Network. And let's bring him in. Trent, good to have you coming down the road with us.
Thanks, Joel. I was thinking that that should have been my graphic at the beginning, seeing as I'm never home. I'm always on the road, but it looks good on you too.
Okay, good. I want to talk a little bit and make sure, because not everybody who watches my show watches yours or vice versa. They might see us advertise, but tell people who you are so they understand.
Well, I'm a sixth generation man from the land. My wife and I have cattle, horses, and pigs in central Nebraska. We've raised three daughters. Our three daughters are 24, 19, and 17. And 22 years ago, while we were actually ranching on the Rosebud Indian Reservation in South Dakota, I decided that people didn't know enough about where their food comes from. And I wanted to be part of the solution instead of just scoffing the dirt and saying people just don't get it. They need to know more about where their food comes from. It doesn't just come from the grocery store. And so I walked into a radio studio, Jim Thompson's radio studio in Spearfish, South Dakota, and I said, "Hi, my name is Trent Loos, sixth generation United States rancher, and I want my own radio show." And Jim laughed at me. Then I sat down, and he said, "You're serious?" I said, "Sir, I'm not leaving until we get a deal." And 22 years later, I produce 4 radio shows every day, and proud to be a part of the Beck team with Trent on the Loose, and get the opportunity to speak all around this nation, around the world. In 22 years, I've spoken in 48 states to audiences and on 4 continents, and with the same premise every time, Joel, and that is making sure that people understand who, where, and how is producing the essentials of life: food, fiber, pharmaceuticals, and fuel. And now more than ever, people are asking questions about particularly food production as a means of national security.
Okay, so that being said, you took a little different turn over the last 6 weeks, and I want to make sure people understand that as well. Before the audience joined us, we talked about what it's like to be out there speaking, which is what you do, and making revenue from it. And of course, now when you take 6 weeks off to run for lieutenant governor of the state of Nebraska, that kind of shuts down the income for a while. But you did run for the Republican nomination to be on the ballot in the fall for lieutenant governor of Nebraska, did you not?
That is correct. Officially, how it works in Nebraska is you have a primary election. Teresa Thibodeau was the candidate for governor that I chose to support. Teresa got in the race late. She did not make the decision to get in until Thanksgiving. And I believed in her so much. And I think that the next governor of Nebraska is the most important governor that we've ever had in the history of the state. And I would echo that in every state around the nation. But I believed in her so much that when she asked me if I would run as her lieutenant governor, I said yes. And so it was, I got to tell you, Joel, I've said this 1,000 times, and I'm going to continue to say it. Politics is 100 times more disgusting than I even thought it was. But what we did in traveling, and I traveled with her to 45 of the 93 counties in Nebraska, meeting the people, talking about the issues, talking about what we do to instill hope and an opportunity in the next generation of Nebraska citizens and U.S. citizens, completely outweighed all of the negativity. So it was a very enlightening experience. I was proud to partner with Teresa Thibodeau, and in fact, we're already talking about how we follow up with that, not as elected officials, but continue the empowerment, because the biggest criticism I got is that people said, "Trent, I thought you were about local control and you want to take this country back and do what the Constitution says and get involved at the local level, at the county commissioners and the school board, and understand the role of the importance of the sheriff." And I said, I do believe that wholeheartedly, but the governor and the lieutenant governor, their job needs to be to empower those individuals back at the county level, and we will continue to do that as we go forward.
Okay. And one more thing, I want to make sure you have the opportunity to get out there. So when people watch Trent on the Loose on this very network, they understand some of what happened in that race. Speak to the money. You got into it late. You talked about the fact you didn't get to every county. I understand that when you get in late, you can't do that. We can talk about the philosophy that you had in the race, and we will be doing that a little bit later because it shares into the overall conversation we're going to have. But money in politics. I think it's only fair to you to talk about what you spent versus what was spent.
So let me qualify. I joined Teresa in 45 of the 93 counties. Teresa herself, because she did get in the race about Thanksgiving time, she was able to get to 85 of the 93 counties. It was my joining after March the 12th that made that a late occurrence. In January, I decided that I was going to publicly endorse Teresa Thibodeau to be the next governor. I've had an excellent working relationship with my current governor, Pete Ricketts, who termed out. That's why he was not involved in this race, so to speak. And I went and said in his office, I said, Governor, I am going to endorse Teresa Thibodeau. I've never endorsed a political candidate. Nobody cares what I think, but I just felt compelled to let people know they need to at least look at who the candidates are and what it is that they offer as governor, the next governor of this state. And he said to me, he said, Trent, I really like Teresa. In fact, he has given Teresa 2 appointments in his administration through the past 8 years. He said, I really like Teresa. She may be the best candidate. She doesn't have enough money to win. And I said, Governor, if it's all about who has the most money, we're in trouble. And so I decided then I was going to do what it took to help her win. I didn't even think about until March that I was going to actually join the race with her to take her over the top. At the end of the day, Teresa spent $300,000 and got 16,000 votes. We had a tremendous showing the last 3 weeks. We were the buzz. We continued to get out and visit with the people. It was a tremendous buzz. We started too late at that level. But the 3 guys, we came in fourth number of votes. The 3 guys in front of us, Joel, spent collectively $32 million. They got 228,000 votes between the 3 of them. So if you do the math, they spent $8 per vote. Teresa Thibodeau spent a nickel per vote with 300,000 on 16,000 votes. That, to me, is how a governor's race and all races really should be. It should be about getting to know the candidate, getting to know the people, not just about buying these high-dollar TV ads, not being critical of a TV ad, obviously, but it should not be the only thing you look at to determine who your next governor is going to be. And so I had the same conversation with Governor Ricketts again the day after the election, and he said, Trent, I told you didn't have enough money to win. I said, I'm going to change that. I'm going to change that because it cannot continue to be about who has the most money. And we didn't do it with one bullet. But I got to tell you, Joel, we made tremendous strides in getting people to take another look at the candidates. And there were so many things that happened along the way where I saw media blackballing Teresa and not even talking about her being in the race simply to keep her down because she wasn't spending the money. It should not be about the money.
I want to speak now to an issue that fell between us. And here's where you got my attention. Other than the fact that I see your commercials all the time on the very network I'm on as well, your promos, I want to throw this at you. What got you on the radar for me was a meeting that you held sponsored by the North Dakota Farm Bureau in Stark County. So you're in Dickinson and you're speaking to 30 on 30 or 30-30 plan.
30 by 30.
And we're gonna speak to that in a bit. I want to make sure that you have the opportunity to speak to that. But because of that, what drew my ire was the fact that the sheriff of Bowman County saw this as a major takings. He went back and started being quoted and talking about deputizing every citizen of Bowman County, meaning their deputy of the sheriff's department, and talking about bringing up arms against anyone who comes as a takings to take their land, which obviously is going to rile people up. That drew me to say, okay, who is this Trent Loos that he brings out that much passion that he can take a sheriff of a county, albeit a sheriff that many people knew the type of philosophy he had, and tell him to go home and deputize all his citizens. So I do some digging. I start looking. I start getting calls, quite frankly. And the one thing I want to make sure you get a chance to speak about, so you don't sit there and think that I'm lying or you think I'm exaggerating, is an article from the Associated Press from Broken Bow, Nebraska. And in that, it says a South Dakota man, was sentenced to probation after pleading no contest to a sale by deception to a cattle fraud case. Now, it says Trent Loos of Norris, South Dakota, at the time, pled to the misdemeanor charge Friday as part of a deal with Special Prosecutor Jason White. Now, prosecutors dropped that felony charge and another misdemeanor charge in the case against Loos and his wife Kelly in exchange for the plea. So you pled no guilty. You ended up with 2 years of probation, and you got a $5,000 fine that went through it, or payment of restitution. I brought that up. I said it. I read it. I talked about it on air. It didn't exactly make you happy. You felt I misrepresented it. I want to give you a chance to speak to it.
Well, you did misrepresent it because you did not say anything about what you just shared. What you just shared is all factual information, and I can explain every bit of that. But what you said, then the reason I reached out to you, is that you said on air, and Senator Kramer was your guest at the time, that I was a convicted felon. That's blatantly false. What I did do, and I tell people I made a mistake. I did what a lot of ranchers have done, and I don't do again. I violated the brand law. I loaded one cow on my trailer in South Dakota, hauled one cow to Nebraska without a brand inspection. I didn't even sell that cow. That cow went to a partner I had in a lease project, but because I violated the brand law, and it was a politically charged scenario that I don't think we have time to go into here because it's not fruitful, the AP article came from a political organization that was trying to put a black eye on me because of what I was doing at the time and exposing the truth. And so that AP story continues to be out there. It's not accurate, but what is accurate is that I violated the brand law. I paid the price for that. I pled no contest on the day before our second daughter was born, and they had me in a position where they were trying to charge my wife and they did charge my wife and myself, and if I made the plea, it all went away. It did all go away. You actually reminded me that I paid a $5,000 restitution to a guy who was my lease partner, and I have no idea why at the time that was agreeable, except in that moment and that time of my life, I just needed to get it behind me and walked away from it. And that's where we are today. But thanks, Joel, for giving me the opportunity to share that story with you on the air when I did. Because as we were in the campaign for 6 weeks, you know that came up and every single media outlet had to talk about it again. And when I explained the story, they're like, all of this has to do with one cow you hauled across the state lines and you didn't even sell? I said, yeah, that's how the media tries to control the narrative.
Well, I will tell you, if you don't remember paying a $5,000 fine, you're doing better than me. And congratulations to you, because I would remember paying a $5,000 fine.
It was 22 years ago.
Also, well, 22 years ago, I'd remember. Then I'd really remember it because $5,000 was worth a whole lot more.
Yeah,
There's also a lawsuit here that comes from the Nebraska State Fair Board. Mm-hmm. And I mentioned that on air too, so I want to give you a chance to address that.
The Nebraska State Fair Board, and this affects people all over the country, not just Nebraska. The Nebraska State Fair Board had repeatedly said time and time again they wanted to stop organizing and sponsoring the Exarban Stock Show. And my family, my wife grew up at the Exarban Stock Show. So many people from North Dakota and all across the country, the Exarban Stock Show has been a vital part of their family every fall. And so what my wife and some friends did, we organized a nonprofit organization and we filed for the trademark and the logo. And so we actually own the trademark and the logo for the Exarban Stock Show. The State Fair suddenly changed their mind and decided, no, you know what, we don't want to get rid of this. We don't want Trent and Greg Harder to have this. So they filed a lawsuit, and they're simply trying to increase my cost of doing business and standing up for the families that want to participate in the Exarban Stock Show if, in fact, the Nebraska State Fair decides that they want to stop hosting that. That's all we did. And they have gone out of their way to increase our costs so that we'll drop it. We are looking forward to the day we have discovery and this comes to light, because there's a lot of things happening that people need to know with taxpayer funds in the state of Nebraska.
Welcome back to Down the Road. We spoke to this in the previous segment. We talked about where my attention got on Trent Loos. Trent on the Loose that you hear on this very network, and it was 30-30. It was North Dakota Farm Bureau, which was bringing him out, and it got the attention of everyone in Stark County to the point where the sheriff in Bowman County went back and was deputizing all the citizens of Bowman County as though they were in a war against the federal government, which means I lived through the 80s. I know how dangerous all that was. And so I want to talk to Trent about 30-30 and let him speak to some of this. Trent, good to have you still with us on Down the Road.
My pleasure. Thanks, Joel.
The 30-30 plan, to me, I'm going to say what I think about it, then you say what you think about it. I see it as voluntary. I see it as something that isn't even in place yet. I see it as a means for potentially people putting land in their CRP, but they have to sign for it. It's not the federal government going out and telling you, you have to do this. It's a goal. It's a goal to put X amount of land in conservation. Now, you tell me where I'm wrong.
Well, first of all, if that was a goal, the federal government combined with the state government already owns 1 3 acres in the United States. The federal government owns 28.4%. The balance of the 33% comes from state ownership. If, in fact, they simply wanted 30% of the land to be in a conservation easement of some type, why wouldn't they just use the land they already own? Instead, and the answer to that question is because they want to control 75% of the United States landmass. If you take the 33% that is currently owned by state and federal government, you add the 12% that is currently in a conservation easement, and then you add on top of that 30% on top of 45%, you have 75% of the land that would be under the control of some level of the federal government. That is dangerous. That removes food production as a means of national security, and that's why I'm extremely concerned. But the bigger picture, Joel, that I want to make sure that we make clear is this is a result of Executive Order 18004, signed on January the 27th, 2021 by then President Joe Biden. That executive order, which is 57 pages long, goes into great detail about how we are going to eliminate fossil fuel from being a part of the United States energy sector. I might remind people that on January the 27th, 2021, national average of gasoline was $2.14. We were still at a point where the United States was energy independent from any other. We were selling oil thanks to the Bakken and what we've done in oil exploration in the Bakken. We were selling oil to other countries. 57 pages, 56 of those pages were dedicated to how we're going to eliminate fossil fuel as a means of energy for the future. 2 paragraphs, only 2 paragraphs in that order speak to 30 by 30, which says, word for word, we are going to take 30% of the land and water and put in conservation easements by, no, that's not what it said. It said return it to its natural state by 2030. Natural state means that Mother Nature and fire is going to wreak havoc instead of farmers and people managing the land. Yes, Joel?
Trent, I'm sitting here looking at it right now. I've got it. Okay. I read it. Again, I use the word goal. You use the word well. They can't take the land. They can't. I mean, it's one of those fear-monger things. The federal government's going to come and take your land, which caused the talk of arming in Bowman County, which again brought my attention to it. I'm going to ask you this, because the way this is set up, and again, it's not in place yet. It's a proposal that people are talking about. The way this is set up, if I am Joel Heitkamp and I own a quarter of land in Bowman County, I want to put this in CRP. I want to put this into a 30-30 program that the federal government maybe will put in place. I have to sign for it. I have to agree to it. They can have all the goals they want, but unless I do it, it's not going to happen. And when you talk to federal experts in Stark County, if that's a goal in that county, because of the fact that some of what you said happened, they've already achieved that goal. So I'm going to ask you, first question, why do you think that farmers can't read, ranchers can't read to know what they're signing? Number 2, I'm going to ask you, since you brought up the price of gasoline and oil, I'll just point this fact out to you. Before Heidi Heitkamp got into the United States Senate, we couldn't, as America, sell oil overseas. She led the charge on that. She got it passed. Of course, we know there's a war. But oil companies, record profits, record profits. Wells they have drilled, they're not pumping from. So there's both sides of that issue as well. I go back to, why do you think farmers and ranchers can't read well enough to know what they're signing?
If they could read, or if they would read the CRP contract they signed, I've had a plethora. I can't tell you how many farmers have contacted me and said, Trent, I didn't read the small print on my CRP contract until after I signed it. In fact, I've had people in this state, North Dakota, tell me that they've been asked to renew their CRP contract and told they can't read it until they sign. That's ridiculous. And I'm going to echo the sentiments of Senator Kevin Cramer, who I witnessed at the 3030 Summit in Lincoln, Nebraska about 6 weeks ago, who said there is no such thing as voluntary. If they decide they want to take your land, they're going to come and take their land. They're funneling money into nonprofit third-party organizations like Nature's Conservancy or indigenous groups, and they're buying land away from farmers and ranchers who are put to, why a farmer and a rancher, what's their one goal in life, Joel? Their one goal is to take this farm, keep it in the family for another 100 years, and pass it from one generation to the next. Why are they being forced to sell? Because farmers have been treated unfairly by the markets.
They're not being forced to sell, Trent.
Oh, absolutely they are. I got a perfect example in Nevada.
It's
Wayne
easy
Hage's
for
ranch
Kevin Cramer
just
to
sold.
go down to Nebraska. It's Trent. It's easy for Kevin Cramer to go down to Nebraska, sit in a room that's a friendly room, and be anti-government, and just in a week, you know, he came back to North Dakota and talked about all the money he brought back to farmers. And let's do this. Since you're against the federal government getting involved,
100%.
You had PPP money. You received over $20,000 in PPP money.
Me personally?
Right here. It's right here. When you're sitting there looking at whether or not you were involved in federal programs.
I have never taken $1 from the federal government. I've never signed up for a program.
You never took any PPP money, is what you're saying?
No.
Okay. Then the records I got from the individuals that provided them to me who worked through the government are wrong, because they said there's $20,000 here that you took in your operation took in PPP money.
I've never accepted $1 from the federal government.
Okay, we'll get to the bottom of that. We can take that on, and I'm glad
I had
you got
the
the opportunity
FSA
to
office
speak to
come
it.
to my house when I bought my ranch 12 years ago, and they said, you're going to lose your base on this. I said, I don't want a base. I don't want any federal involvement whatsoever. I want all subsidies for every part of life to go away. Airlines, welfare mothers, farmers, you name it. We need to be sovereign. I mean, absolutely. Welfare mothers. We have
in the last how many
churches.
days we've heard a lot of talk about welfare mothers. In the same breath, we're talking about making sure everybody has a baby born, which I'm okay with. But we're sitting there talking about welfare mothers, and we're talking about not helping them. And right after they have a baby.
I've been on that path a long time, Joel. I can date you back 20 years talking about I want subsidies at every level to leave the nation.
I have no doubt on your show we'll have a chance to speak to it, and on mine. Do you believe, for example, in federal crop insurance?
No, I do not.
So for these farmers and ranchers out there that
let it be privatized. Why does the government need to be involved in privatizing? It should be privatized and let the insurance companies take care of that, not the federal government.
The insurance companies admit that they can't take on the risk. They can't. They need the backing of the federal government because of the cost that they put on the risk. I mean, it's too risky to provide it. And if they do, it costs too much for farmers to afford it. And so if, in fact, you're right that farmers shouldn't take any money from the federal government, can we admit that federal crop insurance is a subsidy from the federal government?
The federal crop insurance, as it is today, is a subsidy. There's no doubt about it.
Okay.
Clearly.
And you don't feel that it should be there?
That's correct. I believe in privatizing every single aspect. I want 100% sovereignty for individuals and for states, because every time the government gives you money, they're always coming asking for something else, which will lead us back to 30 by 30. And if you've taken any subsidy in any way, shape, or form, you're subject to them calling and saying, this happened during World War II. You know that, Joel. Farms and ranches were taken for the war effort. It will happen again.
I do know that right now, when I read through the 30-30 plan, there is no takings of land. They have to sign it if they do it. Would you agree to that?
I agree that they tell you today that it is a voluntary program. I do not believe in voluntary programs. When they decide they want to come, eminent domain has been implemented. Critical habitat through endangered species programs has been implemented. And when they bring back waters of the U.S., there is no property that's going to be free and clear, because they will claim, as Senator Kramer said again in that 30 by 30 seminar, he said that 84% of the state of North Dakota would fall under the jurisdiction of the federal government if waters of the U.S. is enacted again, which you know as well as I do, this administration will do that.
Do you believe Senator Kramer is a hypocrite when he comes back home and talks about the money, disaster money, federal crop insurance money, money he got for drought? Do you think he's a hypocrite when he says no federal government, the federal government will do the takings, but today I'm going to wave the wand and say, look at all the money I brought in for North Dakota? Do you think he's a hypocrite?
I do not believe that we should bring money back for any part of our state.
That isn't what I asked you. I
That's
asked you whether or not you
I
believe
can't tell
Senator
you what he
Kramer's
said
a
because I
hypocrite.
didn't hear him say that. I heard him say what I told you I heard him say in Lincoln, Nebraska.
Well, now there's two things I've got to dig up. I've got to dig up the fact that Kramer bragged about bringing money back for farmers, number one.
All right.
If I'm right about that, if I'm able to find out, then do you believe he's a hypocrite?
I would have a discussion with him about that, because I do not believe in subsidies any way, shape, or form, and nor do I think he should.
Okay. Trent, good conversation. Good. Let's do it again.
I agree.
promise I'll
Thank
come
you,
on your
Joel.
show just the way you promised you'd come on mine.